Viewers, this is bharatshakti.in. I am Brigadier Chatterjee, and with me is General Mohinder Puri, and we are going to be discussing Kargil War. Kargil War, you recall commitment, you recall courage, you recall grit and determination. Perhaps those military qualities that one looks for in any army. Let's start the story right from the beginning. Jal, as much as I'm aware, your division was there in Kashmir, JNK, and you were in a counterinsurgency role, really. So, how was it getting out of this kind of an operational responsibility to all of a sudden fight on those high heights?
As a even when the division was there in the counterinsurgency role, we had our conventional tasks also given to us. And since we were a Northern Northern Army Command Reserve, so the tasks were quite clear in our minds. But you're right, we never practiced those. We didn't train for those tasks because we were so involved in the counterinsurgency grid and the operations in the valley. So it was a very difficult task, from switching from counterinsurgency to conventional operations is not an easy job. And particularly in counterinsurgency operations, your hands are tied, one hand is tied behind your back, and you don't know from where the militant is going to pop up. Here, the situation is totally different. So it took us time. The officers and the men, their mindset had to be changed, and it was a short window which we had, about 12 days before we launched our first operation. So but we tried to dovetail all our various battle drills and battle procedures and be ready for the task on the first attack which we launched.
My point is there, sir, that your operational role changed. You also need a different kind of equipment, perhaps, to capture those peaks over there. So, was it possible to tie up all this
Yes,
logistics?
yes. See, a mountain division does have the normal artillery complement. It has the artillery brigade. But when we went into this operation, we were really short of artillery, and that is why reinforced artillery was sent in terms of the Bofer regiments. Two regiments minus were orbited to me, which were really what turned the tide in our favor was the artillery, which came, immediately after I assumed the operational role of this area.
So, you tell us a little bit about those who are first-time viewers, perhaps not too familiar with the setting. Tell us a little bit about when you went over there. How was the setting like? I'm told there are between 150 and 200 odd winter vacated posts of ours, which the Pakistanis had got into. How was it exactly, the
It
situation?
was by practice as a part of normal winter that both sides used to withdraw their winter posts because there is no sense in occupying those posts. The logistics were very difficult. The troops were difficult to maintain. There was no interconnecting communication from Pakistan side or our side. So that reduced the threat assessment was also reduced to a large extent. So all these over 50 years, the winter posts on both sides were vacated. But here, they took advantage of our vacation and they came and occupied these posts. Now, when I got this task and when I went there on the 1st of June, it we really had no idea of how the enemy was deployed across the complete line of control in Dras and in the Moscow sectors. So it takes time to build up an intelligence sort of an assessment, and with our patrolling and some form of air reconnaissance and the air force chipping in and little information coming from other sources, we were able to get some real-time assessment of the enemy opposition. And then we were, our plans could accordingly be made and according to what we were assessed on the ground of the enemy.
So that brings me to intelligence, the one that you're talking about. How was it that there was so much of a dearth of intelligence initially? After all, you had troops in contact, you have your aerial platforms, whatever you have, whether it's before Kargil or during Kargil or after Kargil, and you have so many other resources. You have the raw, you have other agencies, of course. In spite of it, such an intelligence failure that they come in so much, they occupy such a large stretch, and we don't know about it.
Yeah, it was an intelligence failure, and intelligence failure at all levels, whether it was the civilian intelligence failure or the military intelligence failure or the troops in contact. Because somebody should have, at least the troops in contact should have known as to where the enemy came. But that was also, I think, I wouldn't say complacency, but it was, an understanding that nobody will come over here. So the last 50 years, there was nothing which happened dramatically to change the alignment of the line of control. So the intelligence was the biggest failure, and we suffered very heavy casualties for lack of intelligence, and subsequently, um, uh, when we went onto the offensive, uh, we suffered a lot of casualties because of the way these people were deployed.
So we keep talking about a lot of things, but out there on the streets, people can't really visualize how a tactical operation takes place, and especially at those heights when you have to scale such high peaks, etc. Can you just explain how does the operation really go in? How does the battalion really go up those slopes? How does it form a firm base and then finally assault?
We have very laid down battle drills and battle procedures right at the unit level, and the basic requirement was to acclimatize the troops in the second stage of acclimatization. We were operating in the valley at about 6,000 feet, 7,000 feet, but when we came over here, the heights were 16,000, 17,000, 18,000 feet. So it was a big problem, and it was a short span of time which we had to put the troops to the second stage of acclimatization. Now, once the acclimatization is done, you nominate the battalion which is going to go for the first offensive. You have to build up that battalion, the logistics for that battalion. Now, you can't task the battalion for a offensive task and also ask them to build up such large quantities of ammunition, particularly in the mountains. The terrain was extremely inhospitable. That, if you go up the slopes, you take two steps and you roll down one because of the loose sort of terrain over there. And the weather was very inclement. There were times when we were in minus sub-zero temperatures operating. So once the task was given, and as you know, in mountains there are very limited approaches to the objectives. You either have spurs or you have ridge lines on which to really go. You can't go through nalas and you can't go through defiles and all these things. So you have to use the standard spurs, which are geographical spurs, which are there. So the battalion, I'll give you an example of the Rajrif battalion. It went in two directions along two spur lines with two companies on one side and two companies on the other side. And since the distance from their base till the objective was more than one night, so we had moved them up so that the fighting really involved only one night, and by first light we could get onto the objective. Thereafter, the artillery was called in. They provided close and very, very effective artillery support. The Bofors were used, and Bofors, we used it more or less as a direct firing weapon in the direct as well as in the indirect role. But I think it was very effective in the direct role. So as the troops advanced, they were given artillery support, adequate artillery support, and when they reached within the safety limits of the artillery support got lifted. And thereafter, the troops were only, they had to depend on their own weapons.
Yeah.
How they sighted their machine guns and how they sighted their support groups and the assault groups. And then after the attack progressed till they captured the objective.
Right. Thank you so much. Some more questions, and that brings me to the point of this decision of the government not to cross the line of control. I'm sure it would have been a hugely restrictive thing for you. How did you cope up with it? Did it cost us more because of going about by such kind of constraints that we impose on ourselves?
Yeah, definitely. I've often mentioned that not crossing the line of control was militarily not in our favor. Even the Air Force had problems in engaging the target because the sweep which they had to go through was east to west, which was against the grain of the country. If they had gone from north to south or south to north, they would have had to cross the line of control. So that was the biggest restriction as far as the Air Force is concerned. As far as the Army is concerned, We could have captured some objectives from the rear, which we were not allowed to, by going across the line of control. We could have captured some of their posts, which were dominating the line of control. And we could have, in the final movement, sort of got hold of a lot of their withdrawing uh, uh,
Troops.
soldiers, troops, into our bag. So these were some of the restrictions. But then, in a democratic country, I think the political leaders have a bigger role to play. And at the national level, in their wisdom, they thought that perhaps it's better not to enlarge the scope of the conflict and keep it restricted to Dras, Moscow, and Kargil areas.
Let's just get on to the other aspect, other dimension that was you used. The air, sir. How effective was air really? And one has a feeling that in the initial stages, the coordination was very poor. But perhaps as operations progressed, it was much better coordinated air power there in the sector.
Yeah, air. You see, when the orders for the Air Force were given, they were equally not prepared for it, like we on the as far as the ground forces were not prepared. We had to go through acclimatization, various battle drills and procedures. They, on the other hand, were also not used to fighting in such extreme climate. Plus, they had this restriction of not crossing the line of control. So it took time for the Air Force really to get into the swing of things. Like it took 12 days for us to get really effective. Their biggest contribution, I think, was the impact which had on our troops. It is a great morale booster
Morale
to
was
see our own aircraft going above and
definitely.
engaging the enemy, and it is a degrading effect on the enemy. Now, all the attacks which we launched were at night. So the Air Force, even if they did hit the targets, which, like I said, they were going against the grain of the country, the target had adequate time to recover. So by the time we came, it was ready to take us on. So to that, and they didn't have night fighting capabilities at that stage. Today, the things are totally different. But I'm talking about 20 years back. So I think these were some of the restriction. Now, as far as coordination is concerned, initially there were dark areas, and we were all working in our own silos. But as time passed, as the operations progressed, the coordination improved, the drills improved, and the communications improved. So it was a better situation later on.
Yours is one formation, I think it lost a lot of men there. You lost 268 perhaps, and a lot more who were injured. How was the casualty evacuation organized? How could we ensure that these boys who've been shot up reach at least a place trauma center where they are properly handled?
We had organized a field surgical center at Gubri, which is just between uh, Zojila Pass and Mughalpura, where the David quarter was located. Now, Gumri, we established this. We had a surgeon and anesthetist. They carried out 700 life-saving operations. And it's a credit to the medicos that any casualty which came to the FSC was saved
Was safe.
if they came in time. And those who were more serious were evacuated from the helipad at Gumri to the Srinagar 91 base hospital in Srinagar. Now, as far as the casualties, the soldiers who died, their remains were brought back from the forward lines by troops, by additional troops. They were brought to a helipad. If the helicopters could evacuate them, we brought them to the base. From there, they were taken by road, sent to their villages. And I think the media did an excellent job in covering the various military ceremonies which were performed in the last, giving the last rites to the soldiers in their villages. And I think this is what really created the involvement of the entire
People.
country in this operation. And that is why we say this is the first highly televised war in the
Drawing
country.
rooms, really. So it was the other way around as far as the Pakistanis are concerned, as much as I'm aware, that they didn't even own up that they're dead were their own men and their own regulars.
Yeah, they're still in a state of denial, and that time they were definitely in a state of denial, and they didn't own up. I thought it was pretty disgraceful for an army not to own up to their dead and carry their dead back. These dead were just rolled down the nalas from the hilltops, And finally, we buried about 144, 145 bodies and give them full military honors, taking the Maulvi up to those inhospitable places. We took the Maulvis by helicopter, we created helipads for them. So we gave them a proper, decent military funeral, which something Pakistan just didn't recognize.
So one or two questions, rather a little on the strategic side. They're both were nuclear powers at that time when they went into battle. The effect of that, otherwise, Pakistan has been, saber rattling its nuclear capabilities far too often. But anyway, what was the situation then? Were you working on a scenario where there could be some exchanges?
See, nuclear power, uh, both were declared nuclear states because 1 year before both the countries had done their nuclear tests. But the environment in which we were operating, the international environment at that time, we were very sure that Pakistan is unlikely to use their nuclear weapons against us. And J&K, incidentally, is the wrong place for any Pakistani to be using nukes. It's not the right place to be
No, it's not the
using
right place, definitely.
nuclear weapons. So it's good that at that time we were, of course, the nuclear threat was very much there, and that is why perhaps we didn't want to enlarge the scope of the war at that stage. But today, I think we've adequately called off the nuclear bluff, and we are in a situation we are not going to fall for that trap again.
Thank you, General. I mean, it's so kind of you to have given us so much of time. You are a man who led the bravest and right from the front. Uh, I'm sure we're all very proud of you, sir, proud of your formation. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much.